right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you. Today, I almost said welcome to Conversations with the Past because I'm so used to that. But no, today we're doing a curator talk. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rebecca Tmel. I'm the outreach and program coordinator here at the Chapman. And tonight we're going to hear from Maureen Folk, who is our current curator here at the Chapman. She's going to be discussing our current exhibit, Hometown Teams, which opened up last month. And this exhibit looks at the history of local football, baseball, and hockey teams, as well as standout coaches and players. So Maureen's going to kind of talk about the evolution of this exhibition, how she curated it, how she kind of came up with the idea, and some behind the scenes stuff, right? Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Like Becca said, I'm Maureen. Feel free to, I think we have a small enough group that feel free to interject with any questions that you might have along the way. Don't want anybody forgetting towards the end. So thank you for coming out tonight to a special talk about our current exhibit, Hometown Teams. It's going to be a little bit different than our usual lectures if you're a regular attendee of those, because we're going to go with some behind the scenes information about the exhibit, how that came together, what that process looks like for us as a museum, and just discuss some bonus information that we weren't able to include in the exhibit. If you've been able to look at the space, you know that it's not a huge space, so we can't include everything or else people would be reading wall to wall. So after I talk here for a bit, we'll shift over to the gallery and you all are free to walk around. I think Becca said about 20 minutes after the talk, we'll leave that open so you all can enjoy the exhibit afterwards. All right, so we're going to begin with the idea. So every exhibition that we do begins with an idea and it begins in that phase. And this was fairly simple. This region has a really rich history of athletics. And I thought that that was worth exploring further. And one of the reasons that I wanted to pursue this, and one of the reasons I knew that this area had such a rich history was simply from my own family being a part of it. So I'm not originally from Glens Falls. I was born and raised in Syracuse. But the rest of my family is from Hudson Falls. So after a lifetime of coming up here to visit, we had gone to dozens of baseball or hockey games, and I knew that these teams were important. And so that my personal connection comes from my brother playing for the Golden Eagles for 2 summers, and then my grandfather played for the Green Jackets from 1969 until the early 1970s. As far as hockey, we attended games any chance we could because we're close with the Driscoll family, and Sean Driscoll connected us with tickets. So we attended lots of games, and I knew based on these connections that I already had that these sports were really central to this area. So I know what everybody is thinking, and that's what about basketball, especially after this weekend. So if you don't know, which I hope everybody does, but Glens Falls just took home the championship in their class at the basketball, the state tournament this weekend. My cousin actually played in that game, so there's another connection. But the reason we didn't include basketball in this exhibit is because it could probably have its own exhibit entirely, and that's something that we could pursue in the future. Looking at local basketball, including the impact of hosting the tournament alongside several great players, coaches, and games. We also know we have some stellar local players that went on to higher levels, and that could certainly be explored. And the reason that basketball wasn't included in this exhibition was simply because we don't currently support a local semi-professional version or semi-professional affiliate team. And so I wanted the exhibits in the sports in this exhibit to fit under this umbrella. And that acted as our theme, and they connected to each other by all having these semi-professional affiliates or these, semi-professional teams or affiliate teams. And so they fit under that umbrella. And so that's one of the reasons we left basketball out. Another reason is simply because we don't have enough space. Like I said, you saw the gallery space. It's quite limiting in terms of what we can really dive deeply into. And beyond basketball, there are skiers, golfers, runners, and a variety of other athletics that deserve to be covered. But when it came down to it, there's only so much that we can cover in one show. And so that's why basketball got left off for this time, but I think it's something we'll come back to in the future. So these photographs here are of the Glens Falls Academy basketball teams, both boys and girls team. You can see this is 1920 to 1921. This is the 1920s for the boys team as well. So now that we had our idea for the exhibit, I began to research and write the exhibition. So the text you see on the blue panels is put together by the staff here at the museum, primarily me, but we also get lots of help and editing from the other staff members. So I connected with the president of the Green Jackets, Hank Pelton, you can see in this photo, early on, and he provided me with some really great information about the organization. And he showed me some of the items that he would really like to loan for the exhibition. And this is where things really began to take shape. So over the course of the next several months, this was more than a year ago at this point that I met with Hank. So over the course of the next several months, I compiled research on teams, players, coaches, and games. That would be narrowed down to that text that you see in the exhibit now. So one of the ways I knew where we wanted to start with research was simply by looking at our collection here at the museum. So you can see here in this image, this is taken from our museum software that stores all of the information about our collection and the items in our collection. And so this is how we're able to dive into the things that we have here in the museum and say what fits our theme. And so this is called a checklist. And so we put a bunch of things together that fit our theme. So you can see we've got photos and trophies. These say no image because they're objects, not photos. So they just simply nobody's taken a picture of them quite yet. But so this is how we take a look at what we have. And then we say, what are the things that we're noticing we have patterns of, or we have a lot of, and how can we fit that into our theme? All right, so for those of you who aren't as familiar with museum collections, this is what it really looks like. This is the true behind the scenes of the museum. These are the storage spaces that you don't really get to see. So we have several items on display at a given time for an exhibition, but this is just a fraction of the objects, photographs, and records that we have stored here at the museum. So as you can see, rows and rows of storage of items and records. This here is the aisle where our Seneca Ray Stoddard photo collection is. And lots of glass bottles here. And this, I know you wouldn't be able to know, but this blue sleeve right here is part of a volunteer uniform from the Olympics in Lake Placid. It's a big, bright blue snowsuit that was worn by someone who volunteered to help with the games. And then this is our ledgers and notes from local businesses and things like that. So we have lots of cool things in our collections. Yes, so we manage the temperature and the humidity levels so that nothing gets, so that everything can be well preserved. And we also have automatic lights in those spaces. So it's dark unless there's somebody working in there. It is located on this property. So our Carriage House Gallery that you're going to go into after this, above you is our object collection, and then below you is our archive and research room. And so our archive stores, yes, so attic and basement is where these are. So I began to look at our collection because we want the items, like I said, to connect with this theme of the exhibit. And I noticed early on that what we have the most of are photographs. And you could see that in the last slide, lots and lots of photographs. And most of the photographs are of baseball and football. And in those sections, you see a lot of local high school teams. So you see teams from Glens Falls Academy, Hudson Falls, South Glens Falls. We have a Lake Luzerne baseball team photo. And in addition to these photos, we had a number of objects that related to baseball. But then we realized we had very few objects that related to football and hockey. So now we're like, how do we push forward without those items? So when we find we don't have a lot of objects in our collection to fill in the exhibition space, and we need more to connect with the theme and the text that we've put together, we reach out to other organizations or individuals to help fill in some gaps. And so we loan objects from the Folk Life Center, the old Fort House in Fort Edward, or Warren County Historical Society. Those are the, the kind of three that we approach most often. And for this exhibit specifically, we ended up loaning many objects from individuals, and I'll talk more about who those people were. But like I mentioned previously, we loaned nearly all of our objects related to the Green Jackets from the current president, Hank Pelton. Over at the Chase Sports Complex in Hudson Falls, Hank has a room like filled with memorabilia. So you've got a couple photos here that are from that room over at Chase Sports. He's got specialty jerseys, trophies, programs, photographs, and so beyond school teams, now we're looking at this bigger team in the Green Jackets, and I really wanted to make them a main focus for this exhibit because for the football section, because having started in 1928, this team is the second oldest semi-professional football team in the United States, just after the Watertown Red and Black. So yeah, so it's a cool piece of history. Now they're not continuously running, so I guess that somebody else would probably have that as their longest continuously running football team. But so Hank gave us a lot of things, and he wasn't the only person who loaned us objects for this exhibit. We also connected with Mark Rogers, who's affiliated with the Glens Falls Dragons. And he loaned us several objects, including the pennant for the Glens Falls White Sox, the trophy won by the Glens Falls Tigers, the Dragons mascot that you see in the show was brought in by Mark, and almost worn by Becca during the opening, but she didn't. And there's also a banner in the exhibit that showcases some various local teams and players. And when we go over to the gallery, you'll see on our object labels, there are these little gray labels all over the wall, and those identify what those items are for people exploring the exhibit. And so on those object labels, you'll see who's responsible for loaning us which items. So anytime there's this number that you see there, 1983.5.1, that means that it belongs to us here at the Chapman Museum. That's how we catalog an object or an item that comes into the museum. So 1983 would have been the year it was donated. It was the 5th collection that was donated that year, which just means if somebody else donates before you, they're number 4. Somebody donates before them, they're number 3, and so on. And this last number indicates that it was the first item in that donation, that collection. So that's what that number means. And so you can see that and know that it belongs to the Chapman Museum. And then if you see on loan, that means it's brought in from somebody else, and we're borrowing it for the period of the exhibition. So that kind of tells you how to read the exhibit and how to go about things. It's just an interesting anecdote, I think. But now we're going to transition and start talking about the different sports and some tidbits that we didn't include in the exhibit that we'll talk about here. So while the White Sox and the Tigers are featured in the exhibit with those 2 items, we didn't have a lot of items relating to those teams. So I want to give some more information about them now, since there's not a lot in the exhibit. So the Glens Falls White Sox team began in March 1980 as part of an expansion of the Eastern League franchise. In the spring of 1979, Dick Stanley and Frank Schaefer, who were working at Procter & Gamble in New York City, responded to an advertisement in the Wall Street Journal seeking buyers for minor league baseball teams. These 2 gentlemen were novice sport investors, and they decided to buy in. So they set out to find a location in upstate New York for this new baseball club. And meanwhile, the Chicago White Sox were very willing to relocate their Knoxville baseball team, and they were interested in the capital region of New York. They particularly liked the fact that there were direct flights between Albany and Chicago, which I still think there are. By January 1980, this pair of investors was set to announce the Schenectady White Sox, but they received a lot of backlash from the neighborhood that they were gonna be in, and a lot of obstruction from the office of the current mayor at the time, Frank Ducci, D-U-C-I, Ducci. Glens Falls saw the deal. They were witnessing this crumble in front of their eyes, and they came through just in time to secure the team to come here to Glens Falls by March of 1980. Now, if you're a baseball fan, you know March is cutting it real close to the start of the season. So they had 1 month until their opening day. So they scrambled to put everything together. And despite Eastfield not having suitable lighting for a baseball game until August of that year, the club drew about 85,000 fans for their 64 home games. And they had the best attendance record in the league, despite having a losing record as a team. So it was a good first season for them in terms of attendance. But following the 1985 season, the team was relocated back south, back to the Southern League, and their new home base was Birmingham, Alabama. And so to fill the gap, the Detroit Tigers come in and they replace Chicago as the parent club here. So the Glens Falls Tigers began playing at Eastfield in 1986. They unfortunately don't stick around for very long. And midway through their 1988 season, the franchise announced that they would be moving the team to London, Ontario in 1989. So the team finished out their season with the best record in the Eastern League, winning 80 games and losing 57, but they didn't end up taking the championship home that year, unfortunately, and they lost to the Albany Colony Yankees in the opening round of the playoffs. But these two teams had several players that would go on to play Major League Baseball, including Chris Hollies, who played for the Tigers who played for the Glens Falls Tigers from 87 to 88. He would go on to have a great career with the Baltimore Orioles. So yeah, his card's in the middle here. Another standout player was John Smoltz, who also played for the Tigers in 1987. He was a pitcher who was traded to the Atlanta Braves organization midway through that 87 season. He had his majors debut the following spring, and he went on to have a 22-season Hall of Fame career. So Smoltz won the Cy Young Award in 1996 and was the only pitcher in Major League Baseball history to record over 200 wins over 150 saves. And I did a little bit of Googling, and he may still hold that record. It wasn't super clear to me, but he might still hold it. And he was easily elected to the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown when he was eligible in 2015. So, and he played right here in Glens Falls. So after these professional affiliate teams left town, the Class A Glens Falls Redbirds of the New York, Pennsylvania League take up residence at Eastfield. So this was unfortunately just a pit stop for them. They were on their way to a new ballpark in New Jersey, so they were only here for the one season. And to my knowledge, this is the last affiliate team that we have at Eastfield in terms of baseball. After this, the independent team, the Adirondack Lumberjacks, played from 1995 until 2002. And after that, the baseball teams that would come to play at Eastfield have been comprised of collegiate athletes. So this began with the Golden Eagles, who began playing in 2004, and they changed their name to the Dragons in 2015. They're still the Dragons. So if you aren't familiar with how this team of how teams of collegiate athletes come together like this, the team was a member of the New York Collegiate Baseball League from 2004 to 2010. And then they were part of the Perfect Game Collegiate Baseball League from 2011 to 2014. And the way that these leagues operate is that after these baseball players compete their season at their respective universities, they can then continue to play during the summer for local teams across the country. If you're a fan, the Cape Cod League is supposed to be particularly good in the summer. So they play during the summer across the country. This keeps players in the baseball mindset. It keeps them training. And it creates opportunities for communities to see some really good baseball games. So it's very possible that players on these teams will then go on after their university careers to go and play in the major or minor leagues following their college careers. So one Golden Eagle player, pitcher Eric Arnett, was a first-round draft pick in 2009. The Milwaukee Brewers picked up Arnett, and while he didn't have an incredible career, he was really hoping, obviously, he didn't have what he was hoping for. He was still a star player for the Golden Eagles at the time. And I think that this is one of the best parts of seeing games in this particular type of league. You can watch players succeed before they ever go on to have their big breaks. And so you can say you watch them play right here in Glens Falls. So today, the Dragons still bring together those collegiate players. And I urge you to check out a game this summer if you're local. And we actually have a raffle at the reception desk to win some season tickets. So totally free. Put your name on a piece of paper and see if you can get a pair of season tickets. All right, so while I could keep talking about baseball, we're going to have to shift a little, and I want to talk about hockey. So the exhibit outlines the area's first professional affiliate team, and that's the Adirondack Red Wings. And they made their way to Glens Falls. Oh, excuse me. It outlines how the team made their way to Glens Falls, and that is all part of the exhibit. So I urge you to read that panel if you're really interested in seeing how they came to this area. I just didn't want to repeat myself too much. So when we were putting together this exhibit, we found that in our collection here at the museum, we only had a few Red Wings programs. We had a couple team photos, but it was from like 82, 83, and 84. So not a lot of variety. We had a pennant, a souvenir sweatshirt. So when it came to the history of local hockey, we needed more stuff. And so it circles back to the loaning we talked about earlier. And this is where we got really lucky. So a friend of mine connected us with former Red Wings player Joe Patterson, if anyone is a big hockey fan. Joe is still local to the area, and so he was able to come in and supply us with some hockey sticks, programs, jerseys, and some photos documenting his time working with not only the Red Wings, but then later the Adirondack Phantoms when he was a coach. So, so he really brought us some cool items to include in the exhibit. So between 1980 and 1984, Joe alternated between the Adirondack Red Wings and the Detroit Red Wings, getting pulled up or sent back down. And he was a left-wing player for them. He also played for several other teams over the course of his career. And but he enjoyed his time in this area so much that Joe settled in this region and even served, like I said, as the head coach for the Adirondack Phantoms from 2010 to 2012. And I think one of the most fun additions to the exhibit that we have are the hockey sticks that Joe brought in. We have 5 on the wall, but 2 of them are signed by all of the players from the Adirondack Red Wings from 2 different seasons. So take a close look at those and you'll see the player signatures on it. They're pretty cool. So I also had the pleasure of connecting with Andy Camp while putting this exhibition together. Andy is the photographer for the Adirondack Thunder and also the Green Jackets. And he's photographed these teams for many years. I think if I remember correctly, he said about 20 or 25 years he's been doing this. So he's seen a lot of turnover with the teams. He was photographing them when they were the Frostbite, when they were the Ice Hawks. This is the Thunder there, but this is the Phantoms, and those are the Flames in the middle. So he really covered a bunch of different teams. And so we have many of his images on the TV screen in the exhibit that are kind of cycling through. So feel free to check those out. And I would argue that Andy is really just as much a part of local hockey history as the players and the coaches, in the sense that he has documented these games for so long that he is one of the reasons we can look back and remember what these games were like, because we have the images to document them. And so he's really been integral to that. And this documentation is so important because it's one of the best ways for us to look back and remember. And Andy generously loaned many images, but also some objects for the exhibit. And I think these objects came from his personal collection. So beyond it being his career, I think Andy's just one of the biggest fans of the team. So it was fun to work with him. So we actually have an entire small case in the exhibit that's dedicated to some of his bobbleheads, a souvenir hockey stick, a Phantoms practice jersey, and a classic Thunder cowbell. So we've got some fun things in there. But by the time I had connected with these individuals, as well as Sean Driscoll at the arena, we had put together a series of items that we felt really spoke to the dynamic history of hockey in our area. So you may notice that there aren't a lot of photos on the wall of hockey that relate to that history. And we have a lot more items than we do photos, but that's simply because we just don't have as many photos here in our collection at the museum. So you'll see more of the hockey photos on that TV screen, like I said. So hockey is the only local sport that continues to host a professional affiliate team. And so for such a small city, we're really, really fortunate to have this connection. And I think it really provides something that the community often rallies behind. And this is in the exhibit, but I do want to highlight it really quickly in this talk as well. Glens Falls wouldn't have this rich hockey history if it hadn't been for Ned Harkness. And I just want to briefly talk about Ned because he was responsible for building support and enthusiasm around investing in this building, in this space for this team. And, and bringing in the Red Wings to occupy it. Ned actually moved here to Glens Falls from Canada, and he lived here for many years before he was offered the position as head coach for the Detroit Red Wings in 1970. And then from 1971 till 1974, he went on to serve as general manager for the team. And so this connection between the Red Wings organization and his love for Glens Falls is really paved the way for this arena to be brought to life. And so after the completion of the arena in 1979, the Adirondack Red Wings took up residence for the next 20 seasons. So Ned is really directly responsible for something that has a huge impact on our community to this day.
And it brought a lot of people to our.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the events beyond hockey that happen in this space. So it's really wonderful to have. So after the Red Wings organization moved their team, this is a period where there's kind of a revolving door of various teams, including the Ice Hawks, the Frostbite, the Phantoms, the Flames, and now luckily we have seems to be a steadier presence with the Thunder there. This is one of the themes that you will see with local affiliate teams, local affiliate team sports, particularly baseball and hockey. And this happens across the country. You get this turnover of teams, and it's simply because organizations have different needs that they want to meet. They want to be able to have their team easily travel. They want to ensure that they can sell out tickets and things like that. They want to make sure the players aren't too far from their home team so that if they want to call somebody up to play, it's easy to get that player there. So there's a lot of reasons that the parent teams will move these lower affiliate teams around. But the Thunder have remained a steady presence since 2015. And they were even the very first Glens Falls-based hockey team to win a playoff series later in 2015, since the Adirondack Red Wings had done it in 1994. So we didn't have a playoff run from 1994 until 2015. So the last section of the exhibit features the Green Jackets. And the Green Jackets will be turning 100 years old as an organization in 2028, which is really impressive. And it was definitely one of the reasons that we wanted to so strongly feature them. Before they were the Green Jackets, the team organizers wanted to host a contest to decide the team name. And the story goes that a little girl submitted the name Green Jackets, and that won her a season pass for 1928. but it's believed that her inspiration for submitting the name Green Jackets actually came from a pack of gum, a popular brand of gum at the time, Green Jacket gum. So it is a Canadian brand, but as far as I know, there was plenty of Green Jacket gum here. And I would love to know if this story is true or not, but I think it's just fun to think of in the meantime. So we do have a Green Jacket gum label on display in the exhibit, so feel free to check that out. So like many teams of the time, the Green Jackets played until they temporarily ceased play between 1937 and 1939. And they again ceased play from 1942 until 1945 during World War II. So this is the case. This is the case for all sports, during this time. And as you walk around the exhibit after, I welcome you to look at some of these photographs through this lens. And it's interesting and it's somewhat heartbreaking to look at some of these team photos, of which many predate World War I and World War II, and consider some of these players never returned to their baseball teams or their football teams. And it's interesting to ask yourself, what would these teams have looked like if not for the war, or which players really would have made it if they had come home. So it's an interesting time period to be looking at the sports and how they changed. So after the Jackets resumed play in 1946, they rejoined the Eastern Football League until that disbanded in 1952. And this continued for a decade. And the team wouldn't resume play again until 1962. So like I said earlier, not necessarily continuous play. They have some breaks for different reasons. But this is when the team really began to build more of an interest. And in 1969, they joined the Empire Football League. And this period is where we saw a lot of renewed interest in participation. And with new players and momentum from a really stellar season, I know 7 straight game wins doesn't seem like a lot, but the Green Jackets don't play that many each season. So that's a really good run for them to have. And with new players, they've got this momentum. They went on to win the 1969 Empire Football League Championship. And you can read more about that game and the players that were involved on the team on one of the panels in the exhibit. No, these are community members who love to play football. Yeah, and that's really a point of pride for the team, I think, and especially for Hank, is just it's a collection of young men and sometimes women who are just really passionate about football. So makes for an exciting game, I can imagine.
Couple of names. Vic Leland was a successful businessman, Cleveland paper.
Mm-hmm.
In Glens Falls, Sam Paul, he's town supervisor over in Fort Anne, and been involved in a lot of things, veterans issues and stuff. And there's a lot of individuals who stayed and made this their home and years.
Well, and that's something I actually have included a little bit later, but it's something Hank has said many times, which is that Green Jackets players really cite being a part of the team as a foundation for success for them in terms of being a part of their community, in terms of the pursuit of their careers. They really feel that the Green Jackets provided a foundation for them to be successful. So even beyond football. So this is my grandfather in the middle, number 78. 1969. So this was the first year that they won in the Empire Football League. Jack Barber. So, so you can read more about the championship in the exhibit. And it also does feature my grandfather's jacket from that 1969 year. So it's cool to see the players' jackets that they would have gotten. So also the exhibit features a small individual player trophy for my grandfather, because that's what we had. And but the main trophy that the team would have won is actually a little bit more of a mystery. After talking with Hank, he noted that hasn't ever seen the trophy from the 1969 year, and he isn't actually sure who has it. So if you hear anything, you let us know and we'll pass that on to Hank. But just a little fun football mystery for you. So with the Green Jackets being such a historic local team, we also wanted to highlight the fact that that team continues to make history. And the first female kicker, Morgan Smith, joined the Jackets in 2022. In 2019, she connected with the team initially to practice kicking, and her dedication took her to Franklin Pierce University, where she kicked for their Division II football team. So you can see, I think it's this picture exactly we have in the exhibit on the television screen. So she's featured in there. And like I said earlier, just a moment ago, that's one of the things we wanted to discuss regarding the Green Jackets organization, and just how many players cite that as their foundation to be their success here, their connection to the community, their connection to their careers, and how football and the Green Jackets took them, brought them to success. All right, so one of the things you won't see a lot of information on in the exhibit are the local school football teams. And that's because these are a lot of schools have supported football teams, and so there's a really, really rich history. And so it would be so hard to cover all of that in such a small space. But something came into our possession last week from one of our audience members here, Barbara Stevens, and she brought in a book, and I invite you to take a look at this book afterwards. But she brought in this book, and it's a collection of articles, correspondence, and clippings that documented the 1941 undefeated Glens Falls high school football team. And it was originally assembled to submit as an argument that Coach Gerald Donnelly, team co-captain Royal Van Vranken, and the 1941 team be accepted to the Glens Falls High School Sports Hall of Fame. So I just wanted to highlight this book specifically because it's an incredible resource for learning more about local high school football during this time. And I can't wait to read more from this book. So while the team was undefeated, Coach Donnelly actually noted that they were not a great team. They might have had an undefeated record, but he said they weren't a great team. He said that they were good, but that they needed to work harder. But he honored them by calling them the team that never quit. And I think that's a pretty high honor. So it's an inspiring story of success that happened right here in our own backyard. So like I said, take a look at that book after. It's really interesting. It has a lot more information about Royal Van Vranken as a student athlete. And he's actually featured in our exhibit, but he's featured as an adult when he coached the Little League team to the Little League World Series. So we have him featured in the exhibit in a totally different way. So this is something that we realized as we're putting this exhibit together. Our knowledge of local sports teams and our preservation of that history is pretty minimal. It's pretty limited, and it's something that we definitely want to expand. And so if you ever have information about the teams that you were a part of or teams you know of, we always welcome more information here. Okay, so this exhibit actually really did open up the doors for us, and we've been working on building that knowledge base here so that when people inquire about sports history in the future, we just have more answers for everyone. So one of my biggest hopes for this exhibit was that it brought a new audience to the museum, and in return, we hope that it brings more people out to see some games. So for a small city in the foothills of the Adirondacks, we've been so fortunate to host as many teams as we have, and I hope that we continue to support some of these semi-professional or affiliate teams in the future. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit now. I have a few items up here on the table that weren't included in the exhibit, but they're interesting parts of our local sports history. So I'm going to wrap up, and I invite you to come up and check out some items on the table. I do ask you don't touch anything, but I have a pair of gloves up here, so I'm happy to show you what we have. The red book is the only item on the table that you can touch, but I ask that you handle it gently. So with that, does anyone have any questions for me before we explore the table or explore the exhibit?
Yeah, it's the logo is. No affiliation.
There's no affiliation, and I've been trying to solve this mystery all week because I wanted to include it in the talk. I think that the Green Jackets had the G before the Packers did. I don't know that it was like taken from the Green Jackets. I think there were multiple teams that had tested out this G or this logo. It's something I'm looking into further. But the Green Jackets existed before the Packers, I think date-wise. It's just a matter of when they adopted that logo. So I'm trying to find that out. But yeah, it's the Packers G. It's, you see it and you're like, that's a Packers. Yeah. Yeah. So it is a funny thing. But so here, I'll tell you a little bit about what I have up here. We have some football pants from Queensbury High School from 1970 to 1980. We've got a pair of ice skates that I think are from the 1920s or 30s. We don't have confirmation on that date, but take a look at these. I think you'll be happy that ice skates have come a long way.
Yeah.
There's a nice big bolt in the back of this that looks like it would just jam right into your heels. And then we have some Red Wings programs and a great newspaper. So feel free to come on up. And if you want to go check out the exhibit, you're more than welcome to go into that space as well. But thank you all for listening.